Hi, my name is Katherine Skaggs, and it is time to tell you about the Artist Shaman Healer Sage book that is about timeless wisdom, practices, ritual, and ceremony, all to help you transform your life and to awaken your soul. This is coming out this spring. I'm very excited about it. And most of all, I'm here to not only introduce you to this book, but to shamanism in general, if you're not aware of it. This is something that I've been working with directly since 2007, and it has enhanced my life spiritually. It's enhanced my well-being in all ways, and it's helped me to heal and clear away things in my life that kept me out of balance in so many ways, and that's just the light-handed story. I want to go back a little bit to how I got into my spiritual journey because it relates to why I wrote this book. I wrote this book to share some profound insights, awarenesses, and universal laws and truths that came through these shamanic teachings. It's about worldwide wisdom that's universal, that relates very much to what I've studied in metaphysics since my early 20s and have been trying to live for a long time. I've been a spiritual teacher since my late 20s when I got into metaphysics and trained to do so, and have been trying to embody spirituality in a manner that helps me live on Earth in a really natural way. I'm an empath, as most people I run into are empaths at this point in my life. And what I find is oftentimes it's very difficult to be on Earth, to be embodied in this world that has a lot of challenges, it has a lot of strife. And as good as it gets, there's also the duality of the earthly challenges. So I wrote Artist Shaman Healer Sage as a way to bring in some of the teachings that I've been learning since 2007. And I just want to give you a little background of how I got here and a few of the things that are going to be in the book. I'm going to show up weekly for the next 14 weeks to give you some insights and some free practices from the book, hopefully some gifts that you can embody and get you excited about some of the things you can learn. When I began writing this book, it was all from my experiences, everything that's been handed down to me verbally. My teachers had been Sandra Ingerman and Jose and Lena Stevens of the Power Path School of Shamanism. And then fortunately, I've been able to study since 2007 with Shipibo shamans that are out of the jungles of Peru. Very interesting people and some of the most loving people I've ever met, the people that I've been able to hang out with, study, spend time in the jungle with, as well as shamans that are connected to the Caro up in the Andes in Peru. I've gotten to directly work with those teachings too. And with a trip up to the Andes, I've been in the jungle much more than in the Andes. And I've also been able to train an apprentice in the area with the Huichol shamans out of central Mexico through the Power Path School of Shamanism. So I carry these lineages from my own experiences, and everything's been verbally passed on to me. But in 2010, I began to write everything down, or actually I've been writing it down for years, but I decided that it was time for me to pass it on through classes I've been conducting for quite a few years. But it started very innocently with teaching creativity and shamanism together. I'm an artist, as many of you know, the artist of the mythical goddess Tarot, and I do soul portraits and channeled intuitive painting. And it all wove together for me that, shamanism is this connection to the earth and to the spirit world. It's connected to the natural world. And that all makes sense to me. That all is something that I love, is finding spirituality in the natural world and all the energy. But even more so, if you look around the world and meet any shamans or medicine people from indigenous tribes, whether it be Native American, South American, Celtic, up in the Arctic, you'll find that these are all creative people. And so that speaks to my soul to make the items that are our tools, from rattles to drums to instruments that we use to do healing work. So I created a course called Artist Shaman Healer Sage that the book is named after, and began teaching a 6-month course where people would come once a month and learn these teachings. And then as time went on and I got better at the internet, we began doing Zoom calls, and it just deepened every year. It's gotten wider and more expansive. I've grown as a teacher and one who can embody the medicine wheel teachings as a result of those classes, but found that it's just more important to find a way to get this to more people, because I watched the individuals who studied with me grow and transform in ways that I can't even explain to you. It was miraculous in many ways, empowering in so many ways, ways where suffering patterns were dropped, where there was a place of taking responsibility and being able to clear away the suffering, or at least begin to tend to the patterns and nurture oneself with greater compassion. There are teachings that help us ground and be more present and know how to clean away the dense energies of worry and the emotionally dense energies of fear and trauma, and be able to find a way to live. That's what a shamanic practitioner is, someone who learns to live with the spiritual world in a practical way within nature and to restore that in all their lives. So this book is something, and these teachings are something that are practical. And they can be practiced by anyone of any faith or lack thereof to connect with the greater divinity within and all around, and to bring blessings. So I want to tell you a little story about how I got here that I find is kind of, I tell it a lot. I find I've become a storyteller on the path of shamanism. And I find that if you live your life and you learn from it, you probably are a storyteller, because you can take a look back at everything that's gone on in your life and hopefully extract the wisdom, find a little humor, and become more conscious. And then use it as a tool, not to talk about yourself, but as a tool to teach others, and to know that we're all connected, that my story might be your story, and that as I share what I've gone through and some of the wisdom that's come out of it, then hopefully that'll make a difference in your life and inspire you to know that you can do it too. Because I can tell you that life wasn't easy as an empath growing up. Many of the people that I run into and work with are empathic, sensitives, and are desiring more harmony, a greater way to be that's not, so challenged as this earthly world and all its conflicts and challenges have. We feel everything. So I grew up in Oklahoma, and I grew up Baptist in a traditional Christian family. And fortunately, as I grew up in Oklahoma City, we had a farm that I got to go to quite regularly. And that was the place where everything was good. Everything else seemed kind of conflictive and hard in the city. I didn't feel like I fit in. And yet when I went to the land, that's where I was home. I was home with the horses. I was home with the land. And I understood there was something about the land and nature that gave people a different perspective. I remember my Girl Scout troop coming, and girls that had lived in the city were on the land, and they saw something different. They saw the magic and the beauty. And I had no language spiritually for that back then. I had no understanding of shamanism. But as I reflect upon my life, I see that I had roots in the land, and I connected to the spirit of the land back then. And that is making a resurgence today for people to heal through nature and through connecting to the spirituality of nature, through the essence and the healing powers and this divine healing energy that comes through all of nature. And on some level, I intuited that as a kid. So fast forward, many, many years, I came along and I began to seek out a change in how I found my spirituality. Religion no longer cut it for me. It was too defined as good or bad. And I was often knowing I was not going to fit in and was the bad one. And so I was seeking something more compassionate, and I found metaphysics, universal laws and truths, and practices there to meditate and turn inward. And that was the beginning of my true spiritual path, where I ultimately became a teacher and owned a metaphysical store, and went on to find that really gave me greater richness and healing. And yet as life went along, I still had multiple dark night of the souls. And if some of you have had challenges, maybe you've had a dark night of the soul. Maybe you've had soul loss, or you've had a trauma, or you've had some really difficult times and you don't quite feel at home in yourself. Well, I speak to all these things in these teachings, but more importantly, I went through the experience. I lost everything in the 90s. I had blown up this great store, great life, and yet I find out later, many years later, that I'd been carrying some trauma, and it came out in my life. I ended up closing my store after I became ill. And I pretty much lost everything. I lost a relationship. I lost all that I owned because that store was it. Financially, I became on hardship. And I dealt with not only physical illness, but depression. And it was challenging and difficult. And yet, after a year of rest, I began to come out of it and pulled on my spiritual roots to find my way. Ended up working in corporate America for more than a couple of years. And then I returned back to Fort Collins, where I had a second metaphysical store, only to have my business partner say 3 months in, I don't want to do this. So again, I was faced with a similar pattern as what I'd gone through before. And what happened this time, though, is I said, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to lose everything. And I began to imagine how life could be different and how I could make it out of this alive and well and financially okay, to create a new life. And that is a foundational principle spiritually to manifest and create your reality. But I was doing this coming out of hardship. I was doing this coming out of still carrying a pattern that I was beginning to see that was lost, that was something that had not healed itself. And ultimately, shamanism speaks to that when trauma and fear create patterns in our lives that are not great patterns. They're patterns born of trauma. They're patterns born of being afraid. And that there are ways to clean these up, ultimately, that I came around to. But anyway, part of this path unfolds, and these patterns of wellness come back, but there are patterns of challenge. I lost a relationship in 2006, and it sent me down the rabbit hole again. But this time I was, again, much more conscious and said, I got to do this different. And I began to pray, which I do a lot of. And as I began to pray, one of the things that happened was I began to get these downloads and guidance from my guides, from my higher self, to get in touch and find Sandra Ingerman. Now, she is a well-known shamanic author that I was aware of from having had my metaphysical store back in the 90s. I sold a lot of her books, particularly one called Soul Retrieval. And some of you may have heard of these practices of soul retrieval. I will speak to that in my book, Soul Loss and Soul Retrieval. And I looked for her and she wasn't available because she was writing a book at the time on sabbatical. Finally, I come across her teaching or co-teaching in a shamanic retreat in northern New Mexico at a place called Eagle Bear Ranch, which turned out to be my future, to follow that guidance and to get there. I arrived in tears, and for 4 days, I sat on the land and with these shamanic teachers from around the world. There's Sandra Ingerman and Jose and Lena Stevens at the Power Path School of Shamanism, and then 2 shamans from the jungles of Peru, these Shipibo shamans, who I came to love. I didn't have a language I could speak and share with them except the language of the heart. And believe me, that lit up my life. I received healings from each and every one of them. It changed my life. I said, what next? What can I do next? I had a massive healing that weekend. And I went on to do a 10-day training program in shamanism. And then I said, what next? And I began to do ceremonial work, to work with plant medicines. And then I said, what next? And then there was the ability to do a 2-year advanced program in shamanism that was multicultural, where I went to Peru and to the Andes and to the jungles and to Mexico to study with the Huichols there. So those 2 years, as challenging and expansive as they were, gave me a path that I hadn't expected. My path to healing became my path I began to share with others through healing circles, and then through a course I developed called Artist Shaman Healer Sage, and the medicine wheel teachings, and making our own shamanic tools and instruments, and embodying the principles of shamanism. So the more I did this, the more I learned, the more I healed, the more I could take responsibility for how I create my world the way I want, and how to show up when it doesn't seem so manageable. What to call on, that I have spirit guides, that I have helpers, that everything in nature is here to help. So I'm excited because with Artist Shaman Healer Sage, my hope and dream is that I get to share this with you and many more people than I have any idea about. That together, as we take our individual responsibility for our happiness and for our well-being, is that we can move forward and individually and collectively dream a new dream. One of the foundational principles in shamanism is that you are the dreamer of your reality, that you are the one who writes the script, that you are the one who edits the script, if you're conscious enough to do so, that you get all the characters in your play or in your movie, and then if you don't like them, you edit them out and you find new characters to play with. Now, when we're unconscious, we think that we have no ability to do any of that. But the more you practice and become more and more conscious and believe that that's possible, your imagination opens up, your creativity opens up, and you can begin to stir the quantum fields for these principles of curiosity and of imagination and shamanic journey spaces with your spirit guides, with your helpers and your higher self, to literally change the matrix of the energetic field that allows you to create your reality with greater mastery. Now, we are in a time of being forced into this birthing process of our consciousness. And part of the consciousness is to birth our reality with greater awareness, greater intention and purpose. And that's what these principles can help you and support you in embodying, to stay in greater harmony. So I will share many more of these things with you. But before I leave today, I hope that I'm enticing you to come to this series of talks I'm going to do. I will be sharing a variety of things besides what's in the book on just doing some grounding, learning what shamanic journey is, soul retrieval, what the medicine wheel is about, how to work with it. The name of the book, Artist Shaman Healer Sage, is also about working with different mapping systems that are in shamanism. We've got a map that's been given to us as a soul. And the artist, the shaman, the healer, and the sage are archetypes that live within you. You may or may not be aware of them, but your artist self is alive and well somewhere in there. And we're going to do what we can to inspire you to connect to that creative self that dreams up new realities and also is very powerful at sacred destruction, to let go of things when you're done with them so that you can create a new again. And then the shaman is that inner shaman. It's the inner Christ principle, the inner Buddha. It's the mystic and the awakened one that's full of light, that is very good at moving in and out of the spirit world and bridging the gap. It's the one who can see the spiritual in all things. So we're going to wake that up with some of these principles and practices. The healer is that also very connected to both these other parts. The healer is alive and well because of the creative artisan and the enlightened shaman. The healer is the part that knows that you're not really sick, that there is a wholeness to you that goes beyond the distorted reality when you have troubles, when you have illness. And this is the part that is able to restore you. I'll tell you more stories from my journeys as we go along. One in the Andes, I had this download as I was going through an illness up there, that there is no outer shaman, there is no outer healer, you are it. And so that actually gave me a miraculous healing after I'd been sick for about 8 days. And there is an awareness in you that you are whole and complete. And the masterful healer is this hollow bone to great spirit to bring these higher frequencies of wholeness back into your energy field to help restore you at the deepest levels. And then there's this character archetype that we all carry too, whether we engage it or not. I didn't used to engage it, and I think it's full alive now. And that's the sage. That's the wise one, the one who's gone through all of it, who reflects now upon their experiences and brings wisdom. is able to share nuggets of truth and nuggets of universal laws and truths that help you embody this energy and truly walk a path of wisdom. It's also the storyteller, the one who's gone through it all and has these great anecdotal stories that help others. And it can also be the medicine of the sacred clown, the one who's the Hayoka name in Native American traditions. It's the one who gets you to lighten up when you're too serious and to get a different perspective. So I will be sharing all of that, plus rituals and practices, working with the plants, working with your animal totems, your spirit guides, how to call them, how to do different ceremonies, and most of all, how to connect to the divine through the earthly realm and through the heavenly realm, to find spirituality available to you at every moment of your life. So before we leave, I want to offer up one little thing for you to go try that you can say is shamanic. It is born of the natural world and of the spiritual world, to bring the two together. Take some time and go outside, take a nature walk, and just squint your eyes and look around and ask, well, what guidance can come to you today? Is there an animal? Is there a bird? Is there a plant that catches your attention? And know that when that hawk flies above you, or that crow caws at you, or there's a fox that runs out in front of you, that is a conscious being who's bringing you a message from the spiritual world. That if you ask, you will get the answer. If you ask, it will appear to you. Know that it will not only come in a nature walk like this, but if you're asking, you might be driving down the road and sitting at a stop sign and a truck go by. Their U-Hauls have animals on them, or they used to, and you might see an animal depicted on that U-Haul. Well, pay attention, because that may be your message. So I hope this helps you today. I look forward to having this conversation. Write me emails at support@katherineskaggs.com, or message me on Facebook, or leave me a response here, and I'll get back to you so that I can bring you more information and support you in your spiritual journey in a very practical and down-to-earth way that brings you back to your heart and hope once again. We have a good outlook as we all dream with great hope. So again, thank you so much for showing up. I send you many blessings.